Black women have always had sisterhood. You all have had to. White women have been so busy centering men and like seeking men's approval and competing and comparing and focused on beauty and perfectionism and all these things. It's like the system's working just as it should. Just keep all the white women busy over here, just working real hard and raising the kids and trying to do it all and drinking their wine and going to their spas. That like we need to wake up and realize we are not doing ourselves or any woman of any color any favors by pandering to the patriarchy.
D.E.I. Diversity.
Diversity. It's very diverse here.
D.E.I.
Equity equals.
Equality.
Equity is equal
Equity.
to
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
AF.
Welcome to the DEI AF podcast. Our promise with this podcast is to be a trusted platform where curiosity meets candor, where listeners are not just informed but equipped to engage in the work of building more inclusive and equitable spaces. We will always be rooted in truth, driven by facts, and enriched by experience. I am your host, Amelia Ransom, and I am nearly giddy today because I have someone who I deeply respect on the show today. Mitch Shepard is the CEO of Human and is an applied behavioral scientist. Like already, that just sounds impressive, but let's keep going. She began her career leading wilderness expeditions. Don't ever invite me on one of those, but thanks. She has worked with and advised some of the world's top leaders from various industries for over 25 years. But after so many years in corporate boardrooms and a 12-month trip around the world with her family in 2018, and a brush with mortality, a battle with cancer in 2021 and 2022, Mitch had a revelation. Life is too short to just be talking about inclusion. She wanted to live it out loud. So she began to lead retreats for women of all backgrounds and identities to much success, to include so that there would be access, opportunity, community, and lasting friendships. And in full disclosure, I attended the last retreat that Mitch put together in Mazama, Washington. First of all, I'd never even heard of Mazama, Washington before this retreat. And it was as fabulous as I knew it would be with Mitch leading it. So Mitch, welcome to the DEI AF podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so excited that I'm here today. And we knew this would happen. We knew that we would be having this conversation. We've actually been having this conversation for 5, 6, 7 years. How many years? A lot of years.
At this point. I wish we had recorded even one of the conversations that we've had over the years. I wish we had just pushed record and then we would just upload that and that would be the episode.
I know. We should basically record all of our meetings from now on so that we can just turn them into articles because we have real conversations.
We have real conversations, and I'm excited because we're going to have a real conversation today. I feel like there's so much to unpack about what's happening in the U.S. right now. So for those who are listening, we are recording this on the first day of spring, 2025. And I just want to give people a point of reference for where we are in the world and all the things that are happening right now. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, Mitch, and one of the reasons, frankly, I always want to talk to you is because I want to understand what is going on with white women. Like what is happening right now with white women? And I say that understanding that white women have been marginalized in workplaces and homes and communities in the country, in the world for some time. So I don't want to miss that white women are also part of a marginalized, underrepresented group as well. But there's a particular intersectionality, thank you to Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw for giving us that term, that white women experience, which is both the privilege of whiteness and also being subjected to discrimination, sexism, and other things, as we talked about in the workplace and in community as well. And so how do we think specifically about white women in that context and about their allyship to other groups, particularly Black women and other women of color? So that's sort of the frame, if I think about it, that I'd love to start with. But I want to go back and start with your background because you have such a unique background. Tell us about your background in behavioral science. And really, I guess that's my way of asking, can you clarify what is behavioral science and how does it inform your view of DEI?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you started with what is it, because I think it's easy to think it's only about observing behavior, right? That's what it sounds like. But what I found fascinating when I decided to study, I had a long way around actually to get to behavioral science, because when I went to college the first time, I grew up in a family where my dad said, oh God, the last thing on earth we need is a psychologist in the family. Because he was very blue collar, and he just thought it was an unserious field. But I was always really curious about people and the rules and breaking the rules and, well, who gets to make the rules and why do they get to make the rules? And I was always and I was the youngest sister. And so I was always paying attention to behavior. I never realized this until much later, that this was sort of, some of my interest was kind of innate. But I went to school with, like I think a lot of people do, with what you know. And I went into accounting thinking, okay, economics, accounting, that's a safe field. I'll be able to get a job. And it just wasn't my thing. It wasn't my people. And wouldn't you know it, the things I loved best in college were all the extracurriculars and every sociology class, every history class, every psychology class, human sexuality, history of racism, women's studies. And so behavioral science, 12 years after I graduated from my undergrad, there's a lot of space in between, of course, but I went back for a master's in behavioral science, applied behavioral science, which is essentially the combination. For someone who loves variety, it was like the perfect degree for me because it's the combination of psychology, sociology, culture, anthropology, history, economics, and systems thinking.
Wow.
And so it's essentially, that's a very complicated way of saying it is, in fact, looking at why do people do what they do, what works and doesn't work about what people do, because inside of whether it's a family system or a business system or a community or a church, there's this ecosystem that we shape and that shapes us. And so behavioral science is really looking at that through the lens of what's the end goal here, and are people behaving in a way that is getting them closer or keeping them further from that goal.
And do you find that those rules are most often not codified, meaning written down somewhere? Like, it doesn't often seem like these rules, right? I'm using air quote, like that they are often written down and established in the written language. They are simply understood and absorbed through behaviors over time.
100%, which is why it is so interesting to sort of put your eyeballs on it, stick culture in a petri dish, so to speak, right? Like you mentioned in my intro that we traveled. One thing that happened totally related to this when we traveled is we were in one location that we were in. The founder of this organization said, oh, would your kids like to do a cultural exchange with the kids at this school? So the kids in Rwanda, these kids at this school, we're going to share with Addie and Ben about their cultural traditions and customs and food and school day in the life. And my kids were going to do the same. And they couldn't at first identify. They could see everyone else's culture. They could see, oh, people in France are like this. Oh, people in a city in France are like this. They could see these distinguishers. They could see the different cultures across African countries and Asian countries. They could not see themselves.
Your kids, you mean?
Yeah. And we literally took to Google. I mean, we were like, what is American culture? And then we were like, well, all Americans aren't the same. What is Pacific Northwest culture? And we're like, oh, cool. How's that different than East Coast or Southern culture? And then we were like, okay, what about white culture, right? Because that's also not the same.
Sure.
So I think there's just a whole lot that informs it. And I think a lot of the time I spend through my life, whether it's at home or with my clients, is helping people see culture.
Sure.
Which is why when you invited me to come talk about what's up with white women, I was like, oh boy. First, I was nervous because I don't claim to be some sort of expert here. I'm a behavioral scientist, but I'm also a white woman who's had to learn a whole lot, you know, and who has had to see my own culture.
Right.
And that has come with some pain.
Well, I mean,
And
let's
a
go
lot of
there, right?
imperfection. Yeah.
Right. Like let's head right there. You are an applied behavioral scientist. You are also a white woman. And as you just said, like there's a lot that you've had to learn. What do you feel like you've had to learn the hard way that someone who's listening to this might say, oh, I don't have to do it that way? My mother used to tell us all the time, experience is a fool's wisdom. It gives the test first and then the lesson. And so how might you give someone a lesson here so they don't have to take the test necessarily that you took?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's so many things that I've learned the hard way. I guess kind of how I think of it is there's like these mosaic of moments, and they still happen all the time, where I have what I call like the oh shit moment, where it's literally like this moment where I think, how did I not know that before right now? And so I don't have these in any particular order, but is it okay if I just kind of give you a pop, like the mosaic of moments that kind of started to wake me up?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess first it was like seeing culture and beginning to learn whiteness. It was first probably in college, you know, when I grew up in a very white community, a very middle class, blue collar white community, and, you know, grew up with a dad who would say things like affirmative action is not fair and things like that. And I remember just, I was always a person who would be curious, like, what do you mean it's not fair? Like, what is it? What does it do? Why does it do that? So first it was growing up in a family, I think like many white people, where you learn this is America, you know, you can achieve the American dream. Like, especially as a young girl, we've spent so much time teaching girls, you know, you can do anything. You can do, you know, you're empowered. The world is different for you than it was for me. You can do anything you set your mind to do. And I really appreciate that I had parents that taught me that. The problem was it wasn't the full truth. And so I remember this one moment where I was in college and I called my mom. I had gotten this job and I was so excited about it. I jumped up and down. I was literally screaming on the phone to my mom. And she said, and I said, I can't believe I'm so lucky. I'm just so lucky. And she said, when are you going to stop attributing your success to luck?
Oh.
And I literally thought, wow, that was really insightful. Thanks, Mom. Right? Well, then I learned, wait a second. It's actually the message, the updated message is it's luck and hard work, because then I've met tons of people who worked as hard, positive thought as hard, manifested just as hard, you know, as I have, who faced headwinds that I didn't know existed for them. Right? So there were moments like that. There were moments, even like a recent one a couple years ago, where I'm working with two Black professionals who are designing a presentation for a Black audience and for my company. And they show me the presentation deck. And I said, oh, you know, the colors just seem a little off. I'm not quite sure if this is going to work. It seemed really bright and kind of exotic colors. And luckily, I had enough trust with her for her to say, you know what? Do you know that everything in corporate America is whitewashed? Like all those colors you like, all the blues and the tans and the blacks and all these creamy colors, all the, you know, what do they call them? Like sad tan babies? Like everything on Instagram now is just like muted colors. Well, there's a corporate version of that, right? I never would have known that, oh, you mean we live inside of a system where everything around us was designed by and for people who essentially look like we do, right? So I feel like these ahas are happening all the time for me. Years ago, when we're on a road trip with our kids, the car breaks down in the middle of nowhere in California, like rural California. It's hot. It's like 105 degrees out. We managed to call a tow truck. We wait 2.5 hours for the tow truck to come. Our kids are very little. Ben, I think, is 2 and Addie's 5. They promptly fall sound asleep in the tow truck. This good old boy from rural California, Brad and I are in the front seat having a wonderful conversation. He's just such a kind man. And chit-chatting the whole way to the to the mechanic shop. And when we get there, Ben is sound asleep and the air conditioner's on and it's 105 degrees. So he goes, oh, Brad, you get out, you go work on the car, like talk to the mechanics. I'll drive around town with Mitch and the kids so they can continue their nap in the nice air-conditioned car. So then he drives to this farmer's market, asks his wife, unbeknownst to us, if we can have a sleepover at their house because we were probably going to be stranded overnight. I am so tickled. I am so touched that this happened to us, what happened is the car got fixed faster than we thought. So I was actually sad that we didn't get to have a sleepover at this rando's house, okay? But back then, here's what I didn't think about. So I get in the car and I fire off this little story on Facebook, about the kindness of strangers, right? And our besties, when we got home, Mimi goes, oh yeah, Ken read your story. He loved your story. But you know what he said, Mitch? Because he's Black. She said, he read it and said, oh yeah, that would not be happening to my family.
Never, nor am I getting in this car.
That's right. And this is what I had to learn was like, what? Oh my gosh, it just didn't even occur to me. But thankfully, when people have said things like that to me, then I'm able to see, oh, that wasn't just luck. That wasn't just the kindness of strangers. Everyone doesn't feel as safe and trusted and secure walking around the world as I do. That is absolute privilege, right?
Right. So I love that story and I love that you shared it because one of the through lines there is other people have a different experience and that you learn to trust and believe that other people have a different experience, even if you've never had that experience. Because I find that to be challenging for people, not just about white women, but I find that to be challenging for people to understand and believe that you might have a different experience of the very same thing that they've had an experience with.
Yes.
There's something that blocks us from believing other people when they tell us this. But that means that you have had to learn to believe people around you. And so I do want to ask you, what do you think you have learned from the women of color around you, specifically the women of color? Because I know you've spent a lot of time with male leaders, but this episode is really focused on women. And so what have you learned from them and how have you brought Black and brown women into your circles to create the trust that they share? Because I'm very fond of saying to women, particularly white women, if a Black woman or person does not share with you their experience of life as a whatever, a Muslim person, a Black person, whatever that person, whatever identity they hold, if they never talk about that experience with you, y'all are not friends. Right? Like that's not a friendship. I don't know what you might call it, an acquaintance, but it's not a friendship. So how have you brought that circle together and created that trust? And what have you learned?
Oh my gosh. These questions are so big. Okay, so the first part was, what have I learned specifically from women of color? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, but the biggest one is that I went through a lot of my life not realizing that we didn't all have a similar experience. Mm. For example, way back when I first got involved in DEI, I got involved in DEI because I was working with a lot of white men in top positions at tech and biotech companies who said the same thing over and over again. We want more women at this company. We want more women on our leadership team. The problem is when they come, they leave. And then I would watch them in a room and I would see, I knew that their intentions were good, but I would see their behavior and I would see how it was off-putting to women, like how they were creating a culture that, as I would call it to them, and to others, not necessarily, it wasn't inclusive, right? It wasn't honoring of the way that people other than white men wanted to show up in that room. Case in point, like there's a lot of interrupting culture in white male rooms, right? It's like lions playing. It's robust. It's like it can be kind of debate and conflictual and things like that. So that's just one of many examples. But early on when they would say we want more women, what they were really saying, but it took me too long to figure this out, was white women, because no one was even talking yet back then in 2011, 2010, not in the circles I was running in. They were not talking about, and nor was I, quite frankly, like I just have to truth in advertising here. I didn't, even though I knew that I'd studied, Black history, I'd studied women's history, I'd studied the women's movement. I knew the things about like voter rights and how we sort of left Black women behind. There were a lot of things I knew intellectually that I didn't take with me into these business environments. So what would happen is all these companies would spin up programs, like women's programs, women's ERG, right? And Amelia, you have such a deep background in this. I'd be so curious to know what your recollection of the history of how this changed is. But mine is that I remember when Sheryl Sandberg's book came out, Lean In, and she got criticized for it being very white woman focused. And I remember thinking, wow, that was a really good learning for a lot of us, because she took that hit, and then she worked with McKinsey, Lean In and McKinsey, to start McKinsey has, women in the workplace. But then they started slicing their data in around 2012, don't quote me on that, by demographic, by race, not just by gender. And I remember looking at that data and thinking, wow, I have been clueless as to these gaps in terms of how. Now, at that very same time, I was working with Ruchika on a project for a client we were working on together. And she told me straight up, she's like, Mitch, when you're doing this data on women, you need to do a better job of making the distinctions, making the nuances, because all women are not having the same experience at work. And when you're just bucketizing women and making it sound like we all have the same experience, you're not honoring my experience as an Indian woman. You're not honoring the experience of Black and brown women. And literally, I have probably 100 stories like this, right? We need an entire month of the times. But I think, so your original question was like, what have I
What are you
learned?
learning? But I also want to just clarify for people, you mean Ruchika Malhotra, who is the author of Inclusion on Purpose.
Yes, exactly.
I literally just saw her last night. So,
you did? Yes.
I did. So
yes.
She's fantastic. But yes, she is
fantastic
example of someone who is a person who wants to teach, wants to show, wants to bring people into truth about how they show up themselves in a way that invites them actually to change.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And I think that's important, right? I think what you're saying is, again, don't let me put words in your mouth, but I think what I'm hearing you say is that's important because when Sheryl Sandberg's book came out, I remembered this moment. I remember everybody was talking about Lean In. I never heard so many people talk about Lean In my life. I thought we were all going to tip over from all the leaning in, right? Like we were all just going to find ourselves flat on our face from all the leaning in. And I really do remember reading that book thinking, she didn't write this book for me.
Yeah.
That I don't know who her audience is, but I'm certainly not it.
Yes.
Because none of these things are making any sense to the women I know, to the women I'm mentoring at this point in my career. I was mentoring several women. I wouldn't be able to recommend this book to any young woman coming up, looking for leadership, looking for mentorship, looking for resources. I wouldn't be able to recommend this book to any of them. Yes. Because this doesn't reflect the experiences that they're having in the workplace. Like, I get that you have childcare in the workplace, ma'am.
Yeah.
But most of these women do not.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, shamefully, I don't know what to say about this, but I read it and understood it through a cultural lens that made sense to me, which was then telling when I realized, oh, wait, this criticism she's getting, this is criticism for me. Mm-hmm. This is criticism for every white woman who thinks that our experience is everyone's experience when it's not. Right? So, Amelia, I do have a little surprise for you.
Okay. Surprise. Okay.
All right.
Do I like surprises? I do like surprises.
We'll see. This is kind of interesting. So I was talking to Helen, mutual friend of mine and Amelia's,
Yes.
last week, and she said, this is what she said. This is how this came to be. This is the context. She's like, I'm so glad you're going to be on Amelia's podcast talking about white women, because there are certain things you can say to white women because you are one that I can't say. And of course, curious mind, I was like, like a puppy. I was like, well, I had two things. First was, what does she hope I'm going to say? And the other was my self-criticism, which was, oh no, I'm probably not going to say the thing she hopes I'm going to say. So I literally said, wait, before we hang up, I think I have an idea. Tell me if this is a bad idea. And I said, what if I send an email out to a few of women of color who I know and love, and some of whom she also knows and loves, and just ask them those two questions. And these were the two questions, okay? So I wrote a very long email because I was very cognizant to like not expect women of color to educate us white women. So I was very careful to be like, hey, only if you have time, only if this sounds interesting to you.
Sure.
But I know you sometimes get asked to educate others. I will crowdsource whatever you send me. I will crowdsource it for all the white women ever. Okay. So there's a lot. So I can't read it all, but can I read you some of it?
Yes, you can. Please do.
And as I do, what I want to say is to the white women listening, I want to say that as I read these things, that literally every single one of these things are things that I have been learning and have fallen into, and even still sometimes do. Like I read some of these things and I was like, yikes, right? Okay. So this is not like, and
It's not judgment.
this is, I really don't want people to hear judgment. I really hope people can just put their curiosity hat on this.
Yeah.
So there was so much that I had to also throw it into Chat GPT, my new best friend, and be like, please summarize this stuff in such a way that I can actually talk about it in less than 18 hours. Okay. So I'm going to do my best to read some of the highlights here. By the way, are you excited about this? Like, is this fun for you to hear this?
I can't wait because I know that I'm going to just be nodding like, yep.
Okay, that's my question for you is like, if there's something missing, I hope you will tell us all, yeah?
Okay. I
You will, right?
definitely will. I
Okay.
love it.
So, here were a couple of the biggies. One, just like we are not a monolith, neither are women of color. We tend to see culture and put everyone in a similar bucket. In fact, Amelia, do you remember the day that I asked you, what do you think of Candace Owens? And you said to me, do you remember what you said to me?
I do.
What'd you say?
That I don't want to take credit. I don't have to want to take responsibility for Candace Owens any more than you want to have to take responsibility for Jeffrey Dahmer.
Boom. And I was like, wow, what I just said was a super racist thing. And that was a real kind way of Amelia telling me that, basically. Because I was having a moment where I thought, oh, all Black people should be weighing in on what they think of Candace Owens. What? No. Right?
Because
we get to
don't
be
rock with her.
Yeah, like it's not fair that we get to be seen as independent and you all too often by white women anyway.
But this
seen as,
happens.
like,
This is a really important point, and I just want to stay here for 2 seconds because
Yeah, please.
this happens on the news all the time, right? They tease a story and they say, we found the blank blank killer or carjacker or whatever the story is. And across America, Black people and other people of color as well are in their homes going, please God, don't let them be, in my case, Black. Why? Not because I think that Black people are incapable of doing something or committing crimes just as much as anybody else is capable of committing crime. It is because I know that I'm going to be painted with that brush and people are going to have an opinion of me because of that. Now, that's me thinking about the white gaze on my life, right? I don't think I do that so much anymore because I no longer care so much about the white gaze, right? Thank you, Toni Morrison. But that white gaze is what keeps people thinking this and wondering this, because you have to go to work or school tomorrow and people are going to say, oh, did you hear about blank person who did blank thing? And you need to then weigh in and have an opinion about it. And you're like, I have no opinion about this.
Right. and you
Yeah,
don't have a responsibility to have an opinion about it. And
exactly.
so, sorry again for that mess up. But it's these little moments in having like actual
Yes.
quality relationships with people that are outside of your race that help us learn this, right? Okay, I did
100%.
forget to tell you the 2 questions I asked. So here were the 2 questions I
Okay.
asked in the email. First was, what do you hope I will say to white women? What do you think we most need to hear, understand, or do? That was question 1. The second question was, which to be fair, I didn't get much back on this one. People probably just limited on time, or I don't know. But what do you say when we aren't in the room? When there are no white women present, only black women, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Mm.
Now, right? So whatever you have to fill in, like, I hope you will just be unleashed on that. But because there are only curious people on this listening. That's what's happening right now. Curious people. So here are some of the things that came back. I'm just going to read a few of these. Women of color experience not just sexism, but racism. It's not just the overt acts, but the microaggressions, the biases, and the systemic barriers. Our emotions are valid. We are often labeled as angry or aggressive or aloof when expressing ourselves. Respect our personal space and boundaries. Don't touch our hair, our bodies, or ask invasive questions. We're not a monolith. Black women have diverse experiences, opinions, expertise, talents, identities, micro-identities. Colorblindness isn't a thing. You're not helping us. Colorblindness is harmful. Ignoring my race erases my lived experience and struggles.
Listen,
It's
the
dismissive.
colorblindness, I really need to have a funeral for the colorblindness. I need us to have a funeral for it because it's not a thing. It doesn't exist. And I don't, and colorblindness is not what I aspire to.
Yeah.
Again, I'm speaking for me. I do not aspire to colorblindness. I'm so happy to be Black. If God could make me again tomorrow, I would put in a special request for melanin. So you don't need to not see it. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I don't know if people just don't believe us when we say that, but I love being Black.
Yeah.
What I don't love is that people have and hold a negative opinion about Black just for the sake of the color. Like that informs other things that it should not be informing. That does not inform you about how smart I am. It does not inform you about what I do or don't do or love or don't love. That it doesn't inform you of any of that.
Right.
But again, I'd put in an extra special request. Like I
Yeah,
would
it's
choose my parents again and I would choose being Black.
love it. Well, and it's like don't not see it and don't only see it.
Correct.
It's it's like, because when you learn, oh, I know this for myself, right? That when I first started to learn more deeply that Black women, especially Black women, are having a different experience in workplaces than I am, I was so curious that I wanted to talk about it. Then I had to come back to a place where I was like, wait a second. One, it's not Black women's job to educate me. But 2, there is so much more there, just like anyone else I would meet, besides their experience as Black. But you have to, but also, just like you said, you're not a real friend if you're not talking about race, because race flavors your
Correct.
experience of how you're seen, how you're,
Correct. We
how
can
you're,
talk about lots of things. And indeed, as friends, you and I do.
that's
We have
right.
lots of conversations about like
Tons.
how I never want to go on a hike, how I never, and how all you want to do is take me on a hike. It is your mission in life to get me on a hike. And it is my mission in life to avoid this as long as possible. But we have lots of other things in common as well. But when that comes up in conversation, it's an easy, open conversation. But it is because of the trust that is built that each of us feels like we can share ourselves. You share about your children. I don't have children, but you share, you talk to me about them because you know, like I can hold that conversation. You may have a different conversation with a mom about children, the same way that I might have a different conversation with another Black woman about Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. They don't have to be the same thing. But imagine a friendship where you couldn't talk about your children,
I know.
where they just never came up, where it wasn't safe to do that, where, or the person was like, I don't want to talk about that
Yeah.
because I don't have that experience. I don't want to talk about that. Well, that's such a big part of your life
Yes.
That if you have a friendship with someone and you can't express that, that wouldn't be a friend very long, I don't think.
No. No.
Right? And so the same is true about me and being Black. Like, it's not going to be a friendship very long
No.
if I can't bring that experience to the friendship. That is so interesting. Wow, that's some good stuff right there. That's some good stuff.
Well, there's more. Do you want to hear it?
Gosh, okay, I want to hear like 2 more things.
Okay. Well, this one is shifting over into it's basically like a couple things. One, our success is earned. Stop acting surprised when we have wealth, luxury, or high achievements. Advocacy means action, not just words. And then these, I thought these were really important because I think they're so pervasive, which is, what do we do sometimes as white women that we don't even realize we're doing? For example, let me get to this one part. It's so good. Look, do you see I have pages? Okay. First, stop centering ourselves. Like, talk less, listen more. The tears. Like, I've even seen this in the retreats, by the way. I have a real eagle eye radar up for, like, that I balance the retreats very specifically. I curate a very diverse group for these retreats on purpose because I believe we need to bridge across.
Yes. But that's a good conversation. So I'm sorry that I interrupt you, but
Yeah,
I want
no.
to make a fine point here because it is about the learning. Because in all transparency, you and I had this conversation about the first retreat, right?
Yep.
And you were telling me about the retreat you were going to start putting on. I'm so happy for you as my friend. This is going to be fantastic. You said the first one was in Switzerland. And you said this was before, no one's invited yet. This is just like an idea at this point. So I want to be really clear about that. You hadn't really planned out anything. And I remember thinking and then saying aloud, Mitch, I'm not flying halfway around the world to have an experience with a group of white women who will just perhaps tokenize me. I can do that right here in the United States for free. I'm not going there. But I also remember your response. And your response was that you paused and said, I can't create that retreat. That's not what I want to do. And I really have to say, you didn't.
Yeah.
You never created that retreat. The retreat I went on in Washington was majority women of color. There were white women, of course, but we all got to know each other. But I never felt like the only.
Yeah.
And I never felt like my experiences weren't valid or validated.
Yeah. Well, and I think it takes women of color being in the majority, if white women are present, in order for white women to not take over and center themselves and their plight and their whatever. And that's what I was going to say that I noticed is, like, because I've read about, white tears, brown scars, or white women culture, or white fragility and things like that, I'm much more aware now of how. So this is the feedback. Stop the tears. Stop thinking you're the most interesting person in the room. Yes, I want to hear about your things, but stop assuming you're the only one who has them, right? So as white women, we can take up a lot of space. I know that's true for me. I know the women of color listening to this are going to be like, I'm glad Mitch is getting that lesson, right? And don't try to relate to me by, trying to speak like with your Black scent, Don't tell me about your one Black friend or Black person who's just so amazing.
Listen, I need to stay there for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah. I
because
love this, by the way,
I
that
need
you're
to
just like,
stay there.
wait. Yeah.
Hold on, because I need to stay there a minute. I have to tell you this. I might have told you this experience before, but we're now on a podcast, so I need to tell it. So I have this colleague, and we're fine. Like, we're very friendly colleagues. We, chit chat. How was your weekend? This and that. Very friendly. So one day, it's in the morning, and she is making a beeline to my office. And at the time there was glass. My office was all glass, so I could see her coming, making a beeline. And she's like, I need to talk to you. And I thought, okay, I'm ready. Like, whatever it is that's happening in the workplace, let's talk about it. And she said, I watched this movie this weekend. And she starts to like tell me about it. And I paused her and I said, I'm going to interrupt you. And that's rude, but I'm going to interrupt you. Did this movie by chance have a Black person in it? And she stopped and I said, and did they further remind you of me? Because you've never, ever told me about a movie. I'm not a movie buff. Like, I'm not the person you need to come tell about the movie you just saw because it's highly likely I'm not going to see it. But this moment when like you have been waiting to tell me about the one Black person you saw, that absolutely reminds you of me. And by the way, I did actually see this movie. That person does not. I'm not like that person in any way, shape, or form. But it's really interesting. It's that thing where it's like, if there was someone Black in it, like that's how we have to relate. We can relate about a lot of things. Maybe we both like to work out. Maybe we both like books. Maybe we both like to travel. We can relate on a lot of things. It doesn't just have to be the Black thing that you experienced.
Yes.
Because I may not have had that experience. For example, I didn't even like that movie and I would never have seen it. But I was so curious after she said it, I had to go do it. It's
Yes.
that. Sorry. That
Yes.
was,
No apology. That's exact. I mean, I think it brings it to life, right? That these are notes on a
Yes.
page from people I know. So these comments have come to life for me. But
Right.
when you bring it out with this, I think it hits. But last comment, because the rest, the
Yes.
deeper stuff can come, I think, through some of the other questions I think you're
Yes.
planning to ask. But the last thing that just totally relates to what you literally just said is, don't enter every conversation talking about things like shoes, purses, or fashion. Don't quiz me about it as if I cannot have nice things. That's how it sometimes comes across. I know your intent may be to connect with me, but I also like to be talked to about the substance of my work, exciting or challenging projects we're both working on, fun things we do outside of work, etc. Basically build a real relationship with me.
Yes.
Right. That's what I was saying when I was saying like we can't not see color, but we can't only see color. And I think when white women,
Yes.
myself included, are new to building really real relationships with women of color, we tend to, I'll speak for myself. I tended to back then like see color, like almost overemphasize the difference and be almost over
Sure.
curious about the difference and not resonant enough with just all of the ways we're the same.
Right.
Well, not the same necessarily, but just all of the ways that were interesting. Put it that way.
Well, Maya Angelou told us we're more alike than we are unalike.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we likely have other points of commonality or even difference that we can talk about. Like there are probably many things that we can bond and relate over. And so I think that's so true, to be seen as a whole, full person. And to your point about, what do Black women talk about when we're the only people in the room? I'll give you the example, not necessarily of when Black women are in the room, but I did a retreat, as you know, this past fall for Black women at my home in Palm Springs. 40 Black women from all across the country came to spend time. We had some chefs that were cooking for us. One chef I knew, and he brought an assistant who was another man. At one point in the weekend, his assistant came to me and said, can I talk to you for a second? And he took me outside and I thought, oh my gosh, I have no idea what this man is about to say to me. And he said, I told Chef, the chef that I knew, the other one that he was working with, he said, I told Chef that I would help him this weekend, but that I really thought this was going to be a men bashing weekend because it's all these women that are going to get together and all they're going to talk about all weekend are men and how men are horrible and how they're better and how to fix the men and all of that. And he said, what I had to tell my wife last night when I got home was, these women haven't mentioned men at all.
Yeah. So
Not
many
one
other
time.
things to talk about, right?
So
It's
many
like
other things to talk about. He says, it hasn't happened one time. And he said, and I just want to apologize for what I thought I was going to encounter. Like, I didn't know this is what this man was holding in his body, in his mind. I had no idea. He had been nothing but perfectly lovely in my home. I was so glad that he was there. His food was delicious. But something flipped for him, right? When he said, I've been here 2.5 days and you haven't mentioned men once. And so the same is really true. When we're in a room by ourselves, like we really do have 100 other things to talk about. We are not focused on centering the white gaze, even when the white gaze is not present. The same way that a room full of women are not necessarily centering the male gaze, even when the male gaze is not present. The male gaze is present enough. I don't need to center it even when it's not there.
Yes.
So
No,
yes,
this
that's
is
probably why you
so-
didn't get a lot for that answer, because there are no secrets there. We're just talking.
Well, here's the translation I hear, which I love, if I could just call myself out on this. It's like, actually, it's not about you. Like when you all aren't around, we're not talking about you, right? We don't have much to say. I think part of what got me asking that question is that in my background, I've been in rooms of women, like mixed, all kinds of different races and backgrounds of women who are in fact at times talking about the leadership, which unfortunately is often
Sure.
synonymous with white men. And they're saying, well, they do it this way, or I think this isn't quite the way it should be, or whatever. And I have had these moments so many times in the last 20 years where I think, oh, if the white men up there at the top could just be flies on the wall right now. They have no idea that this is how they are impacting some of the people around here, right? And so the question really came from that place, but I think your point is a very good one. So even also, you're right, in rooms of white women too, like it's not like we're spending all our time talking about men, although I think in white women culture, a very big thing is that we do tend to center men. And are we approved? And anyway, that we are going to have a couple of these sessions to talk a little more deeply about things, but
Clearly. But that's a really good, I think there was some really good practical learning, right? And so someone who's listening could say, okay, do I do that? Do I, is that something that I hear and I go, oof, that might be me that's doing that? I hope if you hear that, what you don't hear is judgment.
yes.
I hope what you hear is an invitation to think about it differently. And what you don't have to do is call the Black person you know and say, do I do this? You don't actually have to do that part because let me tell you, somebody's crafting the email right now. You don't have to do that. You can just sit with it a minute, think about if that's you, and try to show up differently. So I want to go to, speaking of some of the practical applications, I really do want, before I get there, I really do want to come back to, because I'm so fascinated by your background as a behavioral scientist. What do you see in the behaviors of white women when it comes to sort of aligning themselves with patriarchal structures and or dismantling them? How are you seeing them show up there? Is this a moment of, oh, I'm thinking about it, I really got to think about how I sit here? Because it is this intersection, right? It's this intersection of privilege and being marginalized as well. So it's an interesting intersection. So I'm curious to understand, because I sit at the intersection of two marginalized groups. So I'm really curious about sitting at the intersection of both privilege and marginalization. And how do you see that informing white women that you work with and experience in community as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're 100% right. I think what we owe it to ourselves as white women to recognize is that we have both benefited from systems of power and also been constrained by those same systems of power. And that how we have been taught and conditioned to be safe and get along and get power and money and safety and belonging and all of that. It's much more complex than I'm going to make it right now. And maybe we can even actually go into the brain science, because I think this is actually quite interesting when we're looking at how do we shift some of the behaviors. But as white women, like in a nutshell, I think a lot of us have been so busy focusing on one, just ourselves, like getting through life or whatever. How do I, as white women, part of our culture is to do a lot of things and to do them well. Like perfectionism is like just pervasive, and, guilt and self-criticism and perfectionism and like hyperproductivity and like put everyone else's needs before your own. It's so pervasive across white women culture that I think a lot of times we don't really stop to say, is this who we want to be? And we don't stop to say, like, is that what all women's culture is? Like, for example, this because I told you, I called you when we were on a phone call, and I said, when I was reading the book White Women, learning that perfectionism is very uniquely like white woman culture. I mean, I'm not saying other people don't have perfectionism, but what we do, like what we typically do when we get into power, and I'll use myself as an example, like years ago when I finally had like a leadership role, you know, I grew up in the outdoors, which means by grow up in the outdoors, I mean, my first leadership positions were in a wilderness environment. I was always the only woman in the room, quote room, on the 28 days, all male instructors, you know, and I knew that if I'm the only one there and these are the only people I have for 28 days, do I want to rock a boat or do I want to just put up, shut up, and get along? Now, I'm not saying these men were awful men. They were like some of my best friends. They were great. Like outdoor culture is its own little micro culture and it's pretty awesome. But there were ways that like I spent almost my whole life working with white men outdoors. Oh, lumberyard and home center in college. Oh, white men in tech and biotech. Like I have just spent so much time in rooms of white men with very few women or people of color in them that I am acutely aware of, like, until fairly recently, until probably the last 4 or 5 years, where my voice has really unleashed and I've like been a rule breaker in terms of what I'm willing to say and do and how I'm willing to show up. I've mostly been just like, okay, this is how you get along here. Like, you know, humor and charm and levity and like compulsory laughter and like, yes, you know, build all the trust in the bank account so that, you know, yes, you can cash in some chips once in a while by saying something challenging. But I think like we learn to play it so safe, so close to the vest. And like, I would almost call it like in really direct terms, like, and I see this behavior, like women, like white women will kind of like cozy up to the men in the room, so to speak, you know, like keep myself safe. And not realize that women of color don't get to do that. You know, like we are creating a culture that other people, we are sort of the default culture that other people have to then, to get in those rooms, almost like act more like us, which isn't fair. I don't know if I'm saying this quite right, Amelia.
Ma'am, listen. Well,
I mean,
listen,
am I
it's not
like,
even
is it
about
making
right.
sense? Like, I don't.
It does make sense. Yes. And I don't want to suggest that there aren't white women who deserve to be in the room, right? So I definitely, that's not what I'm hearing you say, but I definitely
No, that's not.
understand that. And also what it means is, as a Black woman, I feel compelled to, but I also feel responsible to open the umbrella so that other women can come in too. And I do feel like it's an expectation put on me that isn't always expected of white women in the room.
Meaning like to like lift as we rise.
Make sure to lift as you rise. Now, again,
Yeah.
I feel compelled to do it.
Yeah. And
So
I think
it is an expectation that I don't mind living with. And I also want to, just for the listeners, the book that you were referencing, just so everybody's clear about the book you were referencing, is by Regina Jackson and Syra Rao. It's called Everything You Already Know About Your Own Racism and How to Do Better. So that is the book. That is the book. There's a picture of the book right
and
there.
by the way, I will tell you, my bestie and I read this book at the same time, and it was a hard one to get through because the truth is there were moments where I felt very mad and defensive and judgmental. Like, you don't know, you're not a white woman. Like, you don't, I mean, I literally like had moments where I had to call my bestie and be like, what do you think of this chapter? You know? But then I always knew something's to this because I couldn't stop thinking about it for days, even weeks, you know, where I'd be like, oh, what I know, I mean, I'm a damn behavioral scientist. What I know is when it's hysterical, it's historical. When you are triggered, it's because there's something underneath that. There's some grain of truth. There's something you're supposed to learn. There's something you're supposed to be curious about, not defensive. And so this is why I read, is because I don't just read to read. I like read because I like my mind to be just blown, you know?
Yes.
But back to your question. So listen, you said, what is this intersection, right? So I think that the other thing about that is not just realizing, okay, what I would recommend to really any white woman who hasn't already seen the McKinsey Lean-In data is go look, because I think this is the most comprehensive way to look at how our experiences are vastly different from women of color, because they slice the data across industries, across races. They pull direct quotes. They have interviews with women from across companies. And it's just so enlightening. The other thing is, look back at history at who has fought for our rights. Because something I shamefully have not known enough about until the last couple of years has been how much we have ridden on the shoulders and backs of Black women who fought instead of us, with us, or for us and themselves, and then got left behind, and how it feels like, okay, I've heard white women say, and white men too, oh, that was a long time ago. We can't just keep looking at the past. The more we talk about this, the more it's going to be a big deal. The problem is the same thing happens today. So it's not gone. It's just a different manifestation of it. Because back then it was like, oh, well, let's just get the vote. Let's just get women the right to vote. And then we'll deal with Black women later. Okay. Well, later was like, what, 50 flipping years later or something. And it was just, right? And so the thing is, that's what still feels like it happens a lot of times in corporate rooms, when a white woman gets in there and has the opportunity then to use her power and her proximity to then lift and rise, right? Lift while you rise. It's like, oh, but can I? I mean, am I going to just mess things up if I start getting into race conversations? Oh, that's going to just.
Yes.
And I was so hopeful, Amelia, you know this, after George Floyd's murder, when both of us saw the world, companies opening up, finally people are talking about race. And you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, but it's both a sign of progress in an odd way and devastating to see what's happening now, right? Because I was so optimistic. Finally, our white people, myself, other white people, going to look at our role in how we have oppressed, how we have, and white women specifically, we have been oppressed and we have been oppressors. Mm-hmm. And this is what, I know that's, to some people might just sound like, oh, I don't know. It depends who's listening. But it took me just a long time to realize we're not all in the same bucket. We're not all experiencing things the same way. And that white women have been able to be pretty flippin' lazy, honestly. We take a lot of the credit and do a lot less of the fighting. White feminism, faux feminism, white feminism. I heard Glennon Doyle and Abby talking to Gloria Steinem recently about feminism. And they said, what do you think of white feminism? And what she said was, oh, that's so interesting because we know from reading the books and hearing this tone out there in the world that that it's basically means that that feminism is really code for white women, right? Kind of like I was saying earlier. But she said, I would say I wouldn't even define it as feminism unless it includes all women. But we're not there yet. That is not what we're doing yet. No. And so I want more white women to join me in being loud, being vocal, pushing on the boundaries, pushing on men, pushing on other white women. This is not meant to be oh, white fragility or oh, poor me, but it's flippin' lonely because Black women have always had sisterhood. You all have had to. White women have been so busy centering men and seeking men's approval and competing and comparing and focused on beauty and perfectionism and all these things. It's the system's working just as it should. Just keep all the white women busy over here, just working real hard and raising the kids and trying to do it all and drinking their wine and going to their spas. That we need to wake up and realize we are not doing ourselves or any woman of any color any favors by pandering to the patriarchy.
Right.
And hopefully this isn't just too over the top, but truly, I feel very passionate about this. That I'm real sick of women just putting up and shutting up. Too much. Too much.
Who you are. So I think if people know Mitch Shepard, this is who she is. So I would say there are two things. One, when you talk about voting rights, it's really interesting because there have been times when I've worked in companies and a women's group or somebody says, oh, we want to celebrate, the women getting the right to vote. And I'm like, well, that's great. Do you mean all women or do you mean white women? Because we didn't all get the right to vote when white women got the right to vote.
Right.
And the other book, to your point, that I wanted to mention when you say that white women have been oppressed and also been oppressors. There's a really interesting book called They Were Her Property Too, White Women as Slave Owners. I can't think of the author's name right now, but yes, again, Stephanie Jones Rogers. It's a hyphenated name, yes. Really excellent book that I would really recommend for people to read. So I was going to ask you what you recommend people, but I think you've told us what you recommend for people to do. As we wrap up, I wanted to make sure we got into what your practical application, because one of the things we really want to do with this show is make sure that we're giving people an invitation in, like there's a pathway in for you to change or do something better or understand how you might be killing it. If you're doing some of these things that Mitch is talking about, you're like, great. You are earning your allyship and advocate stripes, right? But if you're not, again, I really don't want you to hear judgment. What I want you to hear is an invitation to better relationships, better community, better outcomes for all of us, because our success is shared. There is no success, like it is absolutely shared. So with that, we have some lightning round questions. Okay, what is a book or movie that changed your life?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is so weird, but the first question that came to mind is the one I'm writing.
I love it. Advocate, ma'am.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's that, like, they say that you write a book, like, it doesn't change other lives, it changes your own. Like, hopefully it changes
You write
both.
the book you need.
Yeah. But also, I'd say do what you love and the money will follow. That's a book I never read that changed my life, because I just saw the title and I was like, do I need to read that book? Or I think I could maybe just follow the advice on the cover, save myself $20.
Yourself $20 on the book.
Yeah.
I love that. Who would play you in a movie?
You're going to have to tell me. I don't
Oh,
know.
I
I don't know.
What? That's a great question. This is a great question. Who would play you in a movie?
I literally have no idea.
Okay, we're gonna have to solve that one.
We're just gonna have to skip that one. Like, we're gonna have to skip it. Okay.
She doesn't know. She doesn't know.
The River
people.
Wild, Meryl Streep. Like, I've always loved that movie. I was a river
Meryl
guide
Streep.
years ago,
Meryl
but
Streep
like,
could totally play you in the movie.
who knows?
Meryl Streep is absolutely playing you in the movie 100%. 100%. Also, what is your walkout anthem? Remember, we were talking about walkout anthems. What is your walkout song?
My walkout song, this means like if I'm walking out onto a stage.
Yes.
It is probably the two songs that fire me up, like Bruno Mars, You're Beautiful, like just the way you are. That's my message. That's like my anthem for life. For every woman I've ever met is like,
yes,
you're beautiful just the way you are. Or Tom Petty, Wildflowers, because I'm just a free spirit. I'm a wilderness girl. I'm just like, I don't really fit anywhere. Like, you belong among the wildflowers. You belong in a place you feel free. That's my cooking song.
Definitely belong in the wildflowers, my friend. You definitely do. Bring me some wildflowers back from the wilderness, but please don't take me with you. Thank you. And what are you not certain that you're right about?
Oh my God. Like, besides everything? I mean, honestly, what am I not certain that I'm right about? Well, I feel like parenting is a grand experiment and I'm doing my best and I think I'm doing the right things, but I hope I'm right. And I often wonder if I am.
Yes. I think that's fair, right? You really don't know until much later, right? It is the longest group project that you will ever do in your entire life. I do say to people, I don't have children, but I do say to people, I think one of the top 3 decisions you'll ever make in your life is A, do you want to be a parent? And B, who you decide to co-parent with that's got to be one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make in your entire life. That is huge because you're going to live with that decision for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, your kids are great. You're great. Thank you, Mitch, for joining us today on the DEIAF podcast. This has always been a thrill. This could go on for the next 47 and a half hours.
Oh my gosh.
but I thank you. And, I will bake you something because I'm baking these days like
Oh
it's
my
my dang
gosh.
job. I don't
I
understand
know.
it either. Nobody understands it about me, but I'm working through it. But yes, there's baked goods on my counter right now. What's the problem? Anyway,
I have not
that's
stopped
maybe a
thinking
different
about your
episode.
pound cake since you told me about
Listen,
it a week or so ago.
yes,
Listen,
it's
I
gonna
love you
happen
so much. I know that
for
we
sure.
talked about nothing probably that we thought we were going to talk about,
And everything.
and everything that wasn't planned. But you know what? I'll come back anytime if it's valuable. And
Oh,
I
you're
just
absolutely
adore
coming
you.
back.
I
Thank you,
adore
my
you.
friend.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining us on the podcast today.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. Diversity, equity, inclusion. D.E.I. Diversity, equity, inclusion.
AF.